I was working as an instructor with the Philippine Marines in Mindanao. And so a bullet that was aimed for me, I just moved and a friend was killed. That's when I really got mad, because this was a very personal thing.
Throughout his life and illustrious career, Colonel Ralph Ramirez has served in the military, worked under the Reagan administration, and was an entrepreneur. More importantly, his culture and family instilled values in him that led him to where he is today.
The moral things that my mother taught me and my dad taught me has done well for me all these years. And I think it's the basis that you have to treat people with integrity. You have to treat people equally. And that's a very difficult thing to do in this day and age when people are screwing one another for money.
So how was he able to navigate his way to a variety of opportunities and careers? Keep on watching to see Ralph Ramirez on today's Impactful Latinos.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Now, for those who don't know about you, let's tell them a little bit about you.
Well, yes, I think our story for our family, and for me in particular, kind of starts in Arizona. My mother and father were both the eldest in their families, and fifth and sixth and seventh generation Americans in what was then called the territory of Mexico. And then it became the U.S. territory before it became a state. And I was born in our home in East LA, and I was named after the doctor who delivered me. So my first and middle name are not what you would traditionally have as a Spanish or Mexican family. So when we went there, my brother is 5 years older, my sister is 7 years older, and my brother came home from school, first, second grade, swearing. My mother said, "That's enough, we're getting out of East LA." We had pretty progressive business. We went to our banker, which was unheard of in those days to finance a home. You paid cash. Nobody financed anything like that. Well, she went to our banker, without my dad even knowing about it, and got the place financed, bought a house, and moved us. And he found out about it practically at the time we were moving. So we moved to what is today Rosemead. It was South San Gabriel, Potrero Heights, unincorporated county, way out in the boonies in those days. Now there's a freeway running through where I used to run horseback. So it's no longer the way out in the country as it was then. But we started our construction business. We moved there, and there were people who were opposed to having the only Mexican-American family in the community. There were a petition out to get us out at that time.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Everybody who moved there, who lived, there's about 100 families up on the hill. We call ourselves a hill people, because there's only 100 families. Most of them had immigrated to California from Missouri, from Kansas, from Iowa. They were all part of the Dust Bowl. So they came in 10 years before us, in the 20s. Well, within a very short period of time, my mother, we all became accepted. But in grade school, we found very quickly, mother became head of the PTA. My dad headed the Boy Scout troop. So my sister was a Girl Scout. My brother and I were both Boy Scouts. And so it was part of the culture to give back to the community. And that was one of the ways that we were more accepted. If we had isolated ourselves and stayed in East LA, it would have been a different value system entirely. Because I was raised in the country. My brother and sister were raised in East LA. So very different, our approaches to things are very different, even though we're the same family, lived in the same house. And, until each of us got married. We all lived in the same place. And my dad's business was prospering, so we would always have a cousin or a family, somebody whose home or family life was in turmoil. We'd always have them living with us, not just at dinner. My brother and sister and I, after school, would ride our bikes from South San Gabriel all the way to Alhambra, because our business had moved from East LA, where our location is now an off-ramp of the Long Beach Freeway. That's where we were. We moved to Alhambra and bought a whole block for $3,000 in those days, 1933, I think, or 4. And so at that time, it was all way out in the boonies. And Valley Boulevard was where we had a whole block. Sold it off over the years as sidewalks and storm drains and curbs and gutters had to be paid for, streets made in. So we were selling off pieces of it, and the last piece we sold when my dad retired, and my brother and I sold the property. So I learned all the payroll and learned all of the receivables and our payables and what books meant. I just thought everybody did that. I had no idea until I went to college that these guys didn't know anything. The textbook was rudimentary compared to what real work and real businesses and real family living was. Very different, especially a Mexican-American family. And we were in business there for over 50 years in the same location until we sold it, and that's been about 35 years ago. But our values changed a lot and were very important of how I changed. My mother was very instrumental when she decided she didn't want to work for a while. So she stayed at home, became a mother at home. And so I had her all to myself. I'm like an only child. And so I got all of her attention. And my brother and sister didn't get that. So there's a big difference in how we appreciate our mother because I had her all to myself. I had no idea that was important until many years later. We were very, very lucky in that we were in an isolated community. We learned the culture, but I was speaking, or I should say I was reading Spanish before I read English. But I was speaking English. I don't know how he can handle that, but that's what happened. I was reading to my great aunt who came to live with me, take care of me, make sure I didn't get in trouble. And she read La Opinión, international newspaper at the time. And I was reading that to her every day. So when I went to school and they were talking about Dick and Jane and bears and all that stuff, it was really boring. I was reading an international paper, like reading the Epoch Times today. An international paper I was reading as a kid, and my great aunt would explain to me the complex words, what they meant. So when my mother was told that I was retarded and I would never be able to read English, and I'd better look for some special help, she got really angry. Went down and talked to the principal and talked to the teacher. He's reading the La Opinión every day. How can you say that he can't read? So I had very special care, very helpful, because my mother interceded on my behalf. And I think that was a very instrumental part. If she had never done anything, if she had never interceded, it would have made a big difference in my own life that I wouldn't even have known about at the time.
So how did you ended up going to the military?
Well, that's kind of interesting because I was in high school. At that time, we had a military draft, and the Army was the biggest contributor to the draft. And I didn't want to be in the infantry. My brother had been drafted in the infantry, and I didn't want to. I felt I could swim a lot further than I could dig. So I tried to find a Navy place, and I ended up joining the Naval Reserve in Pasadena. I talked to a couple of buddies of mine in high school because I was elementary school president and I was class president when I graduated. So I was senior class president when I talked my buddies into going up with me. And so I went in the Navy. And I was an enlisted guy. I had 3 stripes and I went in the Navy. And I, from there, developed.
What was it like, though, at that time, being a Latino?
Oh, I didn't think it was a big deal because only about, probably we were the only Mexican-American family until the 6th grade. And then when I went to high school, only 10%. I've gone back, inquisitive, and counted all the names and the people, because I was class president, so I knew about everybody in the class. And I found that less than 10% had Hispanic surnames. Big difference from today, where the same school has about 75, 80% Hispanic. So it was a very different experience as the only Hispanic. But I was treated the same as everybody else. I'd raised an environment already competing with Anglos. I knew I was just as smart as anybody else, and I could compete and get the same kind of grades, if not better. So I was part of the California Scholastic Federation, and so and was very much involved in that in student government, both in high school and college. So being as a Latino, I thought there wasn't any difference. I mean, I didn't have many Latino families that lived anywhere near us. And they were serving our high school from various areas. And in my service clubs, we were a YMCA club. all my buddies were in there. And so I did everything, and we're still friends all these many years.
Did you know what it means to be in the military, to wear that uniform? Or you learn as you go and as you get trained, the value of serving the country?
Oh. Yeah, I do. And I think that's a very good question, because my dad was drafted in World War II, and 3 of his brothers were drafted, and they all served in the Army. My dad became a combat engineer, and my uncles did too. And on my mother's side, 3 of her 4 brothers served in the military. So I had an experience of serving. And the word service is really, it's not I'm in the Army or I'm undeployed. It's the word service. It really is service to your country. So the word means a lot more than just being in the service, because you were serving. Yes, I did have experience from that. And even before Dad was drafted, we'd have people on Thanksgiving who were in uniform and stationed nearby. We don't have many of those bases around here anymore. But we did. So I did have an experience as a kid that just about everybody I knew. And when I look up the statistics, at that time about 90% of everybody knew or had a relative that was in the military. Today, you can flip that around. About 90% have no experience with the military. They don't know it. They don't have a brother, cousin, uncle, aunt, grandfather, nobody who's ever served. So their only memories, only information is what they see in TV or movies. And that's very biased these days. So everybody who joins up is going to be carrying a rifle and running over hills, which is not the case at all. About 95% never fire a gun past boot camp. That's it. So it's a very, very different, very highly specialized military now versus when I first joined. So I served in the Navy and then as an officer for another 4 years after that. So it was 6 years in the Navy. And then I served, I got out and I missed the camaraderie. I missed the friendship. I missed people who were straight shooters, people who were honest friends, people I would call my brother.
And you guys would die for each other. I mean, you...
Definitely, yeah. It's a very different world today, but not in the military. Military, if anything, has become more of a home. It really expresses the values of our country, more so than just about anything in our society. You go to Wall Street, it's money. You go to corporate America, it's towing the line. And if you go into political America, that's really towing the line. So we really don't have a place where you can have a neutral respect of what your last name is or what your complexion is or where you came from. My brother served with guys from Mexico that were not citizens. They became citizens later. And I had Native Americans that served under me, had with me when I was enlisted. So it's a very different, the value system in the military is very higher level than it is in civilian life. Less drugs, less alcoholism, less, but you only get it in the paper, LA Times and places like that, when they want to divide us. So I think it's a very important difference that the values in the military are the closest thing we could have to a biblical value, because you keep your nose clean, you do your best things, and you come home to mama, you know. You can raise your family. 30% of the military now are women. So my sister would have served. She became a nurse, my brother an engineer. So it was all because of the values we held in our family. Very different.
What was it like the first time that you went to combat?
It wasn't.
What's the experience like for
Well, you
someone?
you do what you're trained to do first. So it's not like it's a surprise. You train every day, from the day you're in boot camp to every day you're in the military. You train to be prepared to fight an enemy. So you pray it never happens. If anybody hates war, it's the military, because we're the first guys on the line. So there's no one who loves war as in the military. Not at all. You prepare and be strong, and you're prepared and trained. So you automatically respond. I had an instructor a Marine who was my instructor off of Kennedy School, and he said, "You do what I say, do exactly what I say, and I'll bring you home to Mama." And that's exactly what it is, because the people who don't follow their training, who are not willing to follow their orders, are the ones who get in trouble. They're the ones who don't come home often, whether it's enlisted or officers. We cannot slack in training. We have to be strong. We have to be prepared. And that's what the military does every day, 24 hours, all the time.
Yeah, because the lives of the people there are at risk, right, if you don't do that.
That's very much so. When I was first in combat, we were in battle stations. It was in the Navy, and that place I mentioned to you, the two islands, the island chain off of mainland China, Quemoy and Matsu, they were owned and controlled, and still are, by the Taiwanese government of Taiwan. And that's free China, if you want to call it that, versus communist China. And the flags are different, the people are different, dynamic. I served a lot of time in Taiwan, but aboard ship in the Navy, we arrived on base when the Chinese were still shelling the islands, and they'd cut off all supply ships of water, and there's no water in those islands. So we had to bring water and food and ammunition and personnel to their aid. And we were a major ship, along with aircraft carriers and other cruisers and destroyers, made up our flotilla of ships that arrived to support our Taiwanese allies. Well, then, when they saw that we were arriving, they stopped shelling. But one shell got through anyway, and I had just worked like mad to get off the bridge, because I thought, man, if we're going to go to war, they're going to come right to the bridge. So I got off to secondary con amidships. Doggone, that's where the shell hit. So a bunch of guys were wounded, including me. And so you learn. I spent the better part of another 10 or 12 hours manning welders and electricians and radiomen electricians, electronics technicians, sheet metal workers, all the people cleaning up the mess, getting things back in order, getting people down to sick bay and getting them treated. And it wasn't until 10 or 12 hours that I even knew I was even injured. And it wasn't really much, not like some people who were badly injured. So that when you ask the question, it's kind of hard to answer to say directly, but I just did what I was trained to do. If you're a cook, you have a battle station also, an additional place that would maybe handling ammunition. You could be a welder. You might have another damage control written in case your hit is damaged. So I had damage control people, specialists. So a ship, just like an army base, very highly specialized. Not everybody's infantry. And so I was frightened afterwards. You know? And, but I realized that my training is what carried me through. And if I had been remiss in that and had not done my training and didn't know what to do, I think I might have been even more frightened. So yeah, the other time was when I was working for the State Department in the Philippines. A lot of Muslim terrorists, we called hucks, were the people who were kidnapping and holding people for ransom, smugglers, all kinds of illicit things, fighting the Philippine government. And so as a State Department aide, I was working as a instructor and with the Philippine Marines in Mindanao. And so a bullet that was aimed for me, I had just moved and a friend was killed. So that's when I really got mad. You know? Because this was a very personal thing. It wasn't just a shell hitting a ship. Fortunately, I had massive training, and I had a lot of Marines around me that really knew what they were doing. Filipino Marines I really highly respect. Very, very wonderful, greatly trained, good people. And they were fighting in their own home, their own country. So yeah, it's the wounding part. Now we have so much better ability to save people's lives that we just didn't have, that would have died in the battlefield, in the Army, particularly Marine Corps. In World War II, there's a lot more that died as airmen, but they got shot down, never found their graves. So that there are more Air Force that were killed than many people like that. So it's a very different life. I had 6 years in the Navy, and then 35 years in the Army, and reserves, and then National Guard, and then State Guard. So, but my last 15 years was probably the most fun.
Why?
Because as a historian, and having traveled a great part of the world, I worked for the Center for Military History, California Center for Military History, and that was an adjunct of the Center of Military History that the Army had. So we worked on preserving California's military history. We had many, many training bases during World War II and before, and we still have many bases, and a lot of places that were converted, now civilian. San Bernardino International Airport was Norton Air Force Base. You know, and LAX, there's Los Angeles Air Force Base located right there. Fort MacArthur is now an Air Force facility, and that was an Army base. So that Vandenberg Air Force and Space Force. So there are people all over the place that are kind of hidden from us because we don't normally wear our uniforms off base.
Yeah, you're kind of hidden, so that's why you're here.
Yes. Well, I was going to wear my uniform, but I actually, when I got to the house, I had left it at the other house.
It's okay.
So I didn't have it. So, but we all gather as Americans against any foe of our country. So there's a big camaraderie, a big kinship, and I've been fortunate that I was able to build on those friendships and the conduct of my parents, and build on that, and then I had a few mentors that helped and guided me. So I've been fortunate to have a good value system, and you know, one of the things as an officer, I've been telling young people, I hope you don't have a police record, because you can't be in the military with a police record. You've got to have a high school diploma at least to join. In World War II, that wasn't the case. And the judge would say, Army for you or to jail. Well, that was out of an old movie 50, 60 years ago. It's never happened since, because you could never get in. And those people who get in and just don't cut it, can't handle the discipline, or can't handle the moral conduct, or can't handle themselves in an environment where you're told what to do and you do it, those people don't survive the first 6 months. They're gone. So they get out under general, you know, they're not malfeasance or anything. They're not bad conduct discharge. They didn't just take off or steal something, but there's a difference.
And you've been awarded the Purple Heart and other awards. Can you mention some of them and what they mean to you?
Well, you know, the Expeditionary Medal was one I didn't get for 10 years, and that was for service in Taiwan. And some of the international ribbons that I've got from the Taiwanese government and from the Philippine government, working in defense of their liberties. Those I really feel strongly about. A lot of the others, I was there, so they give you a ribbon, you know. But yet it's not necessarily, although my rank is pretty high, and the real differences, I think, what I really stands out to me are those recognitions from other countries, and the Philippines particularly, and Taiwan particularly.
What would you say to the Latinos who want to enlist?
I'd say you stand taller, you're more proud of yourself, you're confident, you stand on your own 2 feet. I think you become a better American, a better person, and not only that, you can be proud, really proud of yourself. Many people all they see is the John Wayne movies, and they see these old things and where military is in a bad light. Everybody's a druggie, they say. But when you actually look at it, the military has a lower drug incidence than civilian life, lower alcoholism, lower everything, more educated, higher educations. Many civilians that, not officers as I was, have bachelor's and master's degrees, and a higher percentage of higher education and PhDs. You know, and a master's, but a lot of people have bachelor's and masters and further degrees paid for by the military.
Not only did you serve for 40 years, but you also served in different capacities.
Yes.
You served the Reagan administration.
Yes.
Not only that, but you also help businesses. You go in there and assist them. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And even being in different organizations, I mean, you're a very active guy.
Yeah, well,
even now.
Well, I found that I could do a lot more than most people. Part of the advantage I had is I had a lot of friendships, and so we'd confer with one another, and we'd know the assets that one person offers another. So we can consult with our network of friends, and some people I know in Washington I've never met, but we've been friends online and by mail for 20, 30 years. So yes, how do we do that? And I've done a lot of stuff. I worked as an appointee for Governor Reagan and directed an agency as a political appointee. That was a rude awakening because I was naive. I thought, hey, in government, you got a governor who says what you should do. You should be honest and do it courageously. Well, I found fraud. I found all kinds of kickbacks and things. I cleaned out what I could, but we're dealing with civil servants, and we're dealing with politicians and other things. And then I worked for Governor Deukmejian, directed the California Workers' Comp System and OSHA. And so I learned, on top of my insurance stuff, I learned the labor laws. And I learned all of the issues that had to be dealt with to be able to, I had 125 judges working for me. I fired a whole pile of them. They were incompetent, and they were doing terrible work, and they were getting away with it. So I would fire these guys, restrict them, fine them. I had 25 lawsuits against me at one time by judges that I'd fired. You know, so yeah, they're tremendous assets. It's helped my businesses, because when I have a business, like one client who had a large workers' compensation cost, insurance premium, almost running him out of business. He had an employee that was killed on the job, and it was an accident, verifiable accident. But his workers' comp premiums went out of sight, and some of it was done without the best interests of the insurance company, but not the best interest of business in California. So I used some I know the labor law backwards and forwards. I knew all the law and the precedent, and I'd studied it, and I enjoy reading the precedents because that's fun. And anyway, I found that out. I helped them get back into business, got credits on premiums and that, and I do that a lot for clients because I have the skills. So I can look at their insurance policies and see the holes in it that they need, especially these days with this COVID mandation stuff. This is a labor issue. And I haven't seen anybody taking labor issues to court. They're working their way through the system, but this is a labor issue. A labor employer shouldn't be the cop maintaining health of its employees. You can offer it, but you can't mandate it. And that's strictly in the labor code, but it has not been prosecuted yet. So that's going to be some really interesting court cases. And so I help my clients how to prepare themselves. I do a lot for debt, getting them out of debt, how to set up their retirement plans and their group insurance and pensions. Yeah, so this is bringing all the things that I've done for many, many years. So I've worked as consultants for insurance companies because they know they can rely on my work. So the moral things that my mother taught me and my dad taught me has done well for me all these years. And so I think I had a speeding ticket once, you know, and I don't.
Once?
Yeah,
in all these times?
that's it. Yeah, and no, I had two. I had a Porsche.
You had a Porsche.
Yeah, and I
Understandable.
enjoyed driving that car in second gear, and it was such a fun car to drive that I got a lot of tickets in it. So I had to sell it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that was a real case. But in Southern California, we've had a crossbreeding of people from all different walks of life that have moved here from many places. Cubanos, El Salvadoreños, Guatemaltecos, you know, Filipinos.
And Mexicanos,
Mexicanos.
like you.
Yeah, well, you know, that's a couple of things that bother me. I mean, I have an EZ in my name. I have a complexion that looks like I'm Mexicano and Indio, and that's true. And I think as long as they can keep us stupid, as long as they can keep us underperforming, as long as they can keep us underpaid, as long as they can keep us captive, they can control us. And so our choices our political, our occupational. We've got to make choices where we can say, yeah, basta, no more. We're not going to take this anymore. We're not going to be second-class citizens in our own country. No.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think there's great prejudice among people to keep us manipulatable, you know, and they can control you.
In what way?
And fear is the biggest thing, and job. So if they can keep you out of an occupational level where you can make decisions that would be uniformly feasible. When I was a vice president with INA Sigma Chubb, I made sure that when we advertised for jobs, I got the personnel side in. I didn't care who the personnel person was. I want these jobs to be taken equally. I don't care if it's a woman. I don't care if he's a Democrat. I don't care if he's a Republican. I don't care where he worked before. I want the interview to be equal, and not just because of the person's race or background or whatever. And so I've got a lot of good people that I hired. The friendships that I made are long, long lasting. And I think it's the basis that you have to treat people with integrity. You have to treat people equally. And that's a very difficult thing to do in this day and age when people are screwing one another for money. I counseled with Atlantic Richfield, with the president of Atlantic Richfield Oil. And he said, in perfect, you know, East educated Ivy College English, he wanted to know why he couldn't get any Mexican Americans to work for him.
Why is that?
And I said, hey, why should we be the last hired, first fired? Why should we do that? California is a token place. They're going to stay in New Mexico. They're going to stay in Texas. They're going to stay in Arizona, where they had centuries of being treated equally, and they have chiefs of police, and they have governors, and they have mayors, and they have all kinds of people who have surname like mine and a Spanish background, Mexican background. You come to LA, there was a lot of prejudice and very difficult, and you're the last one, first one fired. So I said, so you've got to work doubly hard in this kind of area. And I said, if you needed plumbers, electricians, you need pipe fitters, steam processors, I'll get you 10,000 of them. You want petroleum engineers, there'll be 90,000 people competing against you for that guy because you're so rare and so good. So why should he come to California and be a token? He'd stay in New Mexico, stay in Texas, stay in Louisiana.
Yes, this state is not for
No,
for the weak.
not for the weak. California is a place where you compete. But because of that very reason, we become stronger, we
Yes.
become better. But I knew if I stayed on the issues, like school choice today, I think that's the number one issue that every Hispanic family should adopt and fight for their kids' education. A friend of mine who's was a candidate for governor who said that in his community, South Central LA, that the average high school graduate has 5th grade English and 3rd grade math. That's a failing school, not because the kid is dumb.
What would you say to the Latinos, the youth, or just the Latinos in general, based on your life, if they want to get by, if they want to improve in their lives? I mean, you juggled different things.
A lot of things, yeah.
Yes, at the same
I
time.
get bored pretty quickly, so
Oh, you get bored. Is that what it is?
so I have to be involved in other things. But for a family that has kids of whatever age, they're trying to prepare a child for the world as it is and the world of the future, the education is the number one thing. And they need to prepare themselves as well to be able to handle a kid that's brighter and all get out. I was at home the other day of a friend who's a physician, and one of 11 kids. And he was in the middle somewhere in that pack. But he was ambitious, and his mother kicked him there, and I mentored him at one time and got him into college, kept him in college, made sure he got student loans. And then when he got out of the college, he wanted to become a physician. And I said, you're going to have probably $100,000 worth of student loans by the time you finish your college education and finish your medical school, finish your internship and your residency. And he says, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I said, well, I'll get to join the Air Force. So I got him in the Air Force as a physician. So he was a flight surgeon in the Air Force. So he didn't shoot anybody. He was a flight surgeon, practicing his medicine. And because of that service, it waived all his medical costs. I mean, all of those loans. So he was able to start practicing as a major out of the Air Force. He was an officer, a flight surgeon, and also had a second seat. He went up, everybody, hey, Doc, come with me. And he was able to fly and get all the hours to fly jet fighter aircraft as a physician. Pretty neat. You know?
I think you're pretty neat.
Nice guy.
Getting him into that position, that's amazing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm very pleased.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Colonel
you.
Ralph Ramirez.
Thank you.
It's been a privilege and an honor to have you here on Impactful Latinos.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.